On Christmas Eve, I came back without telling anyone, and what I saw nearly broke me. My daughter Jessica was outside, trembling in the freezing 32-degree weather, without even a blanket to keep her warm. Inside, my son-in-law Michael's family, the Johnsons, were laughing and toasting with champagne around the fireplace. I kicked the door open, holding Jessica tight in my arms, and I said 6 simple words. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, go ahead and like it, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're hearing my revenge story from. I'd love to see how far it's reached. I had just stepped out of the taxi, my heavy boots sinking deep into the snowy yard in front of Jessica's house in Denver, Colorado. The wind was so sharp it felt like it could peel the skin off my face, and I pulled my coat collar up higher. After years of working as a Taekwondo coach, I thought I could handle any challenge, from the suffocating heat of the dojo to brutal winters. But that night's cold still made me shiver. I stood there for a moment, staring at the warm glow spilling from the windows, excitement and nerves mixing inside me. I wanted to surprise Jessica, to see her face light up when her mom showed up out of nowhere. It had been months since we'd seen each other. The front yard was covered in untouched snow, no footprints, like no one had bothered to clear it. Through the big window, I could see the living room bathed in cozy light. Christmas music played from a Bluetooth speaker, Jingle Bells, Jessica's childhood favorite. A long table stretched across the room, covered with a bright red cloth and stacked with food, a golden roasted turkey, steaming cornbread stuffing, cranberry salad with shiny bits of apple and raisins, and glasses of red wine sparkling under the lights. The Johnson family was all there. I spotted Mr. Robert Johnson, Michael's father, sitting with that air of authority he always carried, and Mrs. Linda Johnson holding a glass of wine, her lips curled in a smug smile. Michael's sister Megan was laughing loudly with her 2 kids. Everyone was gathered around the fireplace, raising their glasses in a toast. But Jessica wasn't there. I frowned and leaned closer to the glass, expecting to see her tucked away in a corner. I'd pictured her smiling, talking excitedly like she used to, hugging me tight and telling me story after story. Then I heard it. A faint whimper from the porch. My stomach dropped. Under the weak light, near a snow-covered poinsettia, Jessica was curled up in an old wooden chair. She wore only a thin blouse. Her shoulders were shaking hard, her messy hair damp from melted snow sticking to her forehead. I rushed to her, my heart pounding. "Jessica!" I cried, my voice cracking with fear. I tore off my jacket and wrapped it around her, my hands trembling as I touched her arm. It was ice cold, like all the warmth had drained from her. She lifted her face, eyes red, lips pale. "Mom!" she whispered, barely audible, before collapsing against my shoulder. I held her tight, her body shaking like a bird in a storm. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here," I murmured, even as tears stung my eyes. I pulled an extra sweater from my bag, bundling her in it, desperate to share any heat I had left. Then I lifted her into my arms. Her soaked slippers slipped off and sank into the snow, leaving a messy trail behind us. I held her close, feeling her shallow breath against my neck. All I wanted in that moment was to get Jessica away from there, away from the brutal cold, and away from whatever had pushed her into such a state. But from inside the house, the laughter went on, careless and cruel. I could clearly hear Michael's deep voice, smug and boastful, bragging about something. The whole table burst into laughter, glasses clinking like eerie music in the distance. They were warm and happy by the fireplace, while my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was outside trembling in the freezing air, like she didn't even belong in her own home. Just a few hours earlier, I had been at the Denver airport, still sweating after a week of coaching the national Taekwondo team. The heat of the mats clung to me even as I stood in the chilly lobby, dragging my old suitcase behind me. I was so excited I could barely stay still, picturing Jessica's face lighting up when I showed up unannounced on Christmas Eve. My heart had raced with anticipation. Jessica had always been my light, from the time she was a little girl clinging to my legs, begging for one more bedtime story, to the young woman whose smile could melt away my hardest days. But my job as head coach pulled me from place to place, Chicago, national tournaments, always leaving me with only stolen moments with her. Every time I walked away, I promised myself, just one more tournament, then I'll be with her. And now, finally, I was here, ready for a Christmas reunion I was sure would make her happy. I sat in the airport's waiting area, ready for the short drive to the Denver suburbs. Pulling out my phone, I called Jessica, wanting to hear her voice and make sure she was home. The phone rang and rang, every tone tightening the knot in my chest. No answer. I frowned, guessing she might be busy helping the Johnson family prepare Christmas dinner. I called again. Then again. Still nothing. Unease settled inside me, heavy and dark. I sent her a quick text. Mom's on her way. You home? Then I stared at the screen, waiting for the checkmark that never came. I told myself she'd probably left her phone somewhere, or maybe she was decorating the Christmas tree like she always did this time of year. By the time my plane landed in Denver, night had already fallen. I pulled my suitcase outside, and the winter air cut through me like a knife. Families were hugging, laughing, heading off to midnight mass. I saw a father carrying his little girl on his shoulders, her tiny hands clutching a candy cane as she giggled happily. A lump rose in my throat. I used to carry Jessica like that, guiding her through streets glowing with Christmas lights. But now, it was just me, dragging a heavy suitcase into the night, loneliness pressing down on me. I flagged a taxi, my voice hoarse with exhaustion as I told the driver, "Take me to Willow Creek, 8th Avenue. The streets were slow and crowded, people bundled in scarves and coats, heading toward church for Mass. I stared out the window at the warm lights spilling from homes along the road. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, mingling with a choir softly singing Silent Night. I smiled faintly, imagining Jessica in the kitchen, making the mashed potatoes I had taught her to cook. When the car stopped at an intersection, I glanced outside and noticed a group of police officers directing traffic. Among them, I recognized Daniel, a former student from my Taekwondo classes at the community center. He stood tall, confident in his uniform, but he still carried that same kind smile. I rolled down the window and called out, "Daniel." His head turned, and his eyes lit up when he recognized me. "Miss Rose, you're back," Daniel called out, adjusting his police cap. I smiled at him, trying to hide the exhaustion weighing me down. "Yeah," I said softly, "just wrapped up training in Chicago. You still working here in Denver?" Daniel nodded, his grin bright. "Yep, traffic cop now. You here for Christmas with family?" "With Jessica," I answered, and just saying her name warmed my heart. But then Daniel's smile faltered. His face froze, and in his eyes, for just a second, there was something, worry, hesitation, maybe even fear. A chill crept through me, sharper than the winter wind. "What's wrong, Daniel? Something going on?" I asked, lowering my voice. He shook his head quickly, forcing a smile. No, it's nothing, Miss Rose. Just glad you're back." But his eyes told me otherwise. I wanted to press him, but the traffic light turned green, and the taxi jerked forward, pulling away. I glanced back through the window and saw Daniel standing there in the street, gripping the brim of his cap like it was the only thing holding him steady. As we neared Jessica's house, I told the driver to stop a little before the gate. I wanted to surprise her, to see the joy on her face when she opened the door and found me standing there. My suitcase dragged heavy through the snow, my boots leaving deep marks in the untouched path. The golden lights from the houses nearby glowed like scattered candles. From a distance, I caught the sound of a guitar and voices singing from Jessica's living room. I smiled, picturing her singing like she had when she was a little girl, standing by my side, belting out Winter Wonderland with her clear, fearless voice. I left my suitcase on the step, drew in a deep breath, and lifted my hand, ready to knock. But then, a mocking laugh sliced through the air like a knife. I froze, my hand hanging mid-air. Through the door, I heard Mr. Robert Johnson's gruff voice boom with cruel authority. "That's what they call a daughter-in-law? A woman who can't even have kids? For miscarriages. Haven't they shamed us enough?" His laugh was heavy, dripping with contempt. Then Michael's voice cut in, cold and sharp, always faking depression, locking herself in her room doing nothing. If it weren't for my parents, I'd have thrown her out long ago. Laughter erupted, followed by the sharp clink of wine glasses. Then Megan's voice joined in, venomous. "Yeah, totally useless. A wife who can't have kids, what good is she? Pretending to be sick just so people feel sorry for her. Pathetic." Each word stabbed into me, deeper and deeper. My breath caught in my throat. This was how they treated my Jessica. My daughter who dreamed of a happy family. My daughter who poured her heart into every meal for her husband. Now they sat there, tearing her apart with their words. For miscarriages. I remembered her broken voice on the phone after each one, crying until she had no tears left. And now, they dared to say she was faking it. My fists clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. That's when I saw her. Jessica. She was curled up in a wooden chair on the porch, wearing nothing but a thin blouse. Her head hung low, her whole body trembling in the freezing Denver night. My eyes blurred with tears, and my heart nearly stopped. I rushed forward and scooped her into my arms. Her body shook violently, cold as solid ice. My own hands trembled too, not just from the bitter wind, but from the rage boiling in my chest. Every step toward the Johnsons' door felt like it carried 1,000 pounds, but I didn't stop. I pounded on the wooden door, my fists slamming harder and harder, drowning out the cheerful Christmas music blaring inside. Jingle bells looped over and over, mocking the nightmare scene I had just witnessed. No one came. I gritted my teeth and banged again, harder, like I could break the door with one strike. Finally, the door swung open. Mrs. Linda stood there, a glass of red wine wobbling in her hand. Her lips were painted a glossy red, shining under the light. The smell of alcohol drifted off her, but her smile was forced, polite only on the surface. "Well, Miss Rose, what a surprise," she said, her voice sticky sweet, fake as could be, like I was some unwelcome guest. "Why didn't you let us know? We could have rolled out the red carpet." I locked eyes with her, my anger too strong to hide. "Let you know," I growled, every word cutting through my teeth. "If I'd warned you, how would I have seen this? What did you do to my daughter?" I held Jessica closer, feeling her weak breath against my shoulder, every faint exhale reminding me I couldn't let this go. Linda's eyebrow arched. She glanced at Jessica in my arms with a grimace, like she was looking at something inconvenient. "Jessica just wanted some fresh air," she muttered, her tone soft but laced with contempt. "Don't make such a big deal out of it. It's Christmas. Come inside. Don't stand out there in the cold." Her words hit me like a slap. Fresh air? My daughter was nearly frozen solid in nothing but a thin blouse, and she called it fresh air. Before I could answer, Michael stepped in behind his mother. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his posture screaming arrogance. He held a wine bottle loosely in one hand and shot me a defiant glare. "Mom, close the door," he ordered, his voice dripping with disdain. His chin tilted high. "Let her stay out there until she gets over herself. Who shows up at Christmas dinner acting fragile just to get out of helping?" He chuckled, mocking, like he thought he was clever. Those words were a knife, stabbing straight into Jessica, not just me. I felt her body shrink in my arms, like she wanted to disappear. From the table, Megan's voice rang out sharp, venom dripping off every syllable. "Exactly. A woman who can't even carry a baby to term, what's she worth? Useless." Her cruel laugh sliced through the air, blending with the murmurs of the others. Then Megan's two little kids, Jessica's nieces, ran out onto the porch, curious eyes wide. They looked at Jessica in my arms, then giggled, whispering to each other, "Aunt Jessica's in trouble." Their innocent little voices stung worse than anything, burning like salt in an open wound. My whole body flushed with rage. Without thinking, I rammed my shoulder into the door, then kicked it hard. The door flew open, slamming against the wall with a thunderous bang that silenced the room. Linda's wine sloshed, spilling deep red stains across the expensive rug. The Christmas music cut off suddenly, like someone had yanked the speaker's cord. The whole room went stiff, the air so heavy it was hard to breathe. I stepped inside, still carrying Jessica, each stride leaving a trail of melted snow on the hardwood floor, like marks of fury no one could wipe away. Every eye turned on me. Mr. Roberts sat cold and rigid. Linda's fake smile had completely vanished. Megan glared, her face twisted with disdain. The rest of the Johnson family stared with a mix of shock and irritation. I could feel their hostility pressing in, but I didn't care. Carefully, I set Jessica down on the couch, draping my scarf over her trembling shoulders. Her hands were still icy, her whole body quivering like the winter wind still clung to her skin. I knelt in front of her, searching her eyes, trying to pour my strength into her, even though inside me, a storm of fury and pain raged. The Johnsons' living room glowed brightly, the fireplace crackling, but the air was thick, like everyone was bracing for an explosion. Michael staggered closer, his face red from the wine, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. He lowered his voice, sharp and smug, like he owned the place. You don't get to make a scene in my house, Rose. He said it with emphasis. My house, like he needed to remind me I didn't belong there. Michael stood tall, one hand on his hip, his shirt still hanging half open in that arrogant way of his. But in his eyes, I caught it. A flicker of doubt. He knew I wasn't the kind of woman who bowed down to intimidation. I shot to my feet, pointing right at his face, my voice shaking with fury. No, Michael, I snapped. And you? You think you have the right to throw my daughter out into the cold? To leave her to freeze to death? My blood boiled, each word bursting from my chest. Is that what you call being a husband? Is that what you call family? I looked around the table. The plates were still steaming, the wine glasses catching the light, sparkling like they were mocking Jessica's suffering. Mr. Robert Johnson slowly rose from the head of the table, adjusting his suit jacket with deliberate calm. His deep voice carried authority, cold and heavy. That's enough, Miss Rose, he said. This is family business. A woman who can't give children needs to learn to endure. That's just how life is. His words landed like a sledgehammer, merciless and cruel. I met his gaze, staring into the arrogance of a man who'd spent years as a judge, always in control. But tonight, he'd chosen the wrong opponent. My eyes darted to the table again, the roasted turkey still steaming, the cornbread neatly stacked, the wine shimmering. Then I looked at Jessica, curled on the couch, shivering, her stomach growling faintly like an unspoken cry. I couldn't hold back. My voice erupted, sharp and cutting. So you feast while my daughter sits outside in 32 degrees? No coat, no food. That's what you call tradition? That's what you call humanity? Linda shrugged, her icy smile never fading. A woman who can't have children is a waste, even if she eats, she said softly, dripping disdain. She raised her glass and took a slow sip, like my words, and Jessica's pain, meant nothing. Then Megan chimed in, her tone dripping acid. Your daughter always hides behind her so-called depression to dodge responsibility. Tell me, has she ever cooked a decent meal for this family? All she does is lie in bed, whining, dragging everyone down. She shook her head, eyes sharp with mockery, like Jessica was a burden the whole Johnson family had been forced to carry. Murmurs rippled around the table. Some shook their heads, others snickered, like they agreed. Each sound pierced me, another knife in my chest. I wanted to flip that perfect table, to scatter their fancy feast across the floor, to demand justice for my child. But then, a faint voice came from the couch. Jessica. She tried to sit up, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the cushion. I'm so tired, she whispered, her voice weak, cracking. No one understands. Her words were crushed instantly by Michael's roar. Enough, he barked. Shut up. You've embarrassed me enough already. He stepped toward her, his eyes cold as ice, like he meant to shatter what little strength she had left. I saw Jessica's shoulders slump, her red eyes filling with tears. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I moved in front of her, ready to do whatever it took to protect her. And then the memories came crashing down, one after another. Jessica sobbing on the phone after every loss. The first miscarriage. The second. The third. The fourth. With each one, her spirit broke a little more. She had been such a sweet girl, dreaming of a warm home, family dinners, children of her own. And now here she was, shamed, humiliated, broken in front of people who should have protected her. The pain, again and again, had pushed Jessica to the very edge of despair. I tried to be there for her, even if it was only through long-distance calls. But never, not once, did I imagine the Johnson family, the very people I had trusted, would treat my daughter like this. And Michael, my son-in-law, the man I once thought was decent, was showing his true face now. A cruel bully who had thrown my daughter out into the freezing night, treating her like garbage. I was about to lose it. Through the window, I spotted Daniel standing silently on the porch. Maybe he'd been patrolling the neighborhood. His hard gaze, his clenched fists told me he'd seen, he'd heard everything. I gave him the slightest nod, a signal not to step in just yet. But knowing he was there, it lit a small spark of hope in me. I wasn't alone. I had a witness. Someone who knew the truth. Michael took another step forward, pointing right at me, his mask of politeness gone. I'm warning you. This is my house, he barked. Stay out of it, or things will get worse. He smirked, confident I would back down under the Johnsons' power. He was wrong. I clenched my fists until my knuckles cracked, the rage I'd bottled up my whole life exploding in that moment. The air was so thick it felt like one spark could set the entire room on fire. I locked eyes with him, my voice low but sharp as a blade. You think you can threaten me? You think you can keep hurting my daughter without paying for it? You're wrong, Michael. I'm not letting this go. I turned, glaring at each of them, Robert with his cold stare, Linda with her mocking smirk, Megan with her eyes full of disdain. All of you, I said, my voice echoing in the heavy silence. You're going to pay for what you did to Jessica. The living room went dead silent, like all the air had been sucked out and replaced with raw tension, ready to burst. I placed my hand gently on Jessica's shoulder, feeling how fragile she was under my scarf. My voice was steady, unwavering. This isn't a private matter anymore. This is domestic abuse. My words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through every corner of the room. Linda let out a mocking laugh, swirling her wine glass like this was some sort of game. Abuse? She sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. We're just teaching her her place, Rose. You should thank us for putting up with her this long. Michael staggered closer, his eyes bloodshot from alcohol and rage. He spat his words out like venom. She fakes depression. Fakes pain so she can do nothing. No one's hitting her. We're just sick of her uselessness. He paused, his lips twisting into a cruel smile. Teach your daughter again, Rose. Nobody loses 4 pregnancies in a row. Maybe she did it on purpose. Those words cut like a razor blade. They didn't just tear into my heart, they ripped open Jessica's deepest wounds. I heard her breath catch, sharp, like she'd been punched in the chest. 4 miscarriages. For times she had called me, sobbing, her voice broken, telling me she'd lost children she would never get to hold. For times I could only clutch the phone, helpless, trying to comfort her with empty words across the distance. And now Michael had the audacity to stand there and say she'd done it on purpose. I clenched my fist so tight my nails dug into my palm. My face burned hot with rage. That was a line I could never forgive. With shaking hands, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and quickly dialed the nearest police station. My voice was cold as ice, though inside me, a hurricane roared. I'm calling the cops, I said. A report will be filed. You'll answer to the law. I spoke each word like I was carving it into the air, making sure every single one of them knew I wasn't bluffing. Michael froze. The wine bottle slipped from his hand and clattered against the hardwood floor, red liquid bleeding into the expensive rug. Panic flashed across his face, though he tried to cover it up with his usual arrogance. You wouldn't dare, he barked. But his voice wavered. He hadn't expected me to go this far. Mr. Robert Johnson stepped forward, adjusting his tie. His deep, gravelly voice filled the room. You have no idea who you're challenging, Rose, he said coldly. I've spent my life on the judge's bench. I've seen the worst this world has to offer. You think a simple phone call will make us tremble? His eyes were sharp as knives, reminding me that the Johnson family was used to power, not fear. But I didn't back down. I'd seen my daughter shivering in the snow, and nothing, not even Robert's authority, was going to silence me. From the table, Megan crossed her arms, a mocking smile twisting her lips. Go on, make the call, Ms. Rose, she taunted. Let's see who the police believe, a crazy old woman, or a respected family like us. Her laugh was venomous, filled with confidence that I'd fail. On the couch, Jessica tugged weakly at my sleeve. Her voice was fragile, trembling. Mom, please don't. I just want peace. Her red, terrified eyes begged me to stop. She was scared, scared of their retaliation, scared of more humiliation. My heart broke seeing her like that. But I knew if I gave in, if I let fear win, she'd be trapped in their cruelty forever. I squeezed her hand tightly, trying to pass my strength into her. You don't have to be afraid, I whispered firmly. I'll protect you. I promise. Then I lifted her in my arms again. Snowflakes fell from her clothes onto the rug, scattering like pieces of a shattered dream. I ignored the Johnsons' scornful glares, their muttered threats. All that mattered was getting her out of that house, out of the prison of cruelty they'd locked her in for far too long. As I turned toward the door, I caught sight of Daniel through the foggy glass. He was standing on the porch, his hand resting on his radio, eyes burning with a quiet fire, ready to step in at any moment. I gave him a small nod. He nodded back, firm, gripping the radio like a promise that he'd stand by me. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard Linda barking at the housekeeper to clean the spilled wine. Michael slammed his hand down on the table, cursing under his breath. Robert's deep, angry voice rumbled as he spoke into his phone. Each sound was like an arrow piercing my back, but I didn't care. I took Jessica to my small apartment near the National Training Center, where I'd lived for years as a coach. It wasn't anything fancy, just a living room with an old couch, a simple kitchen in the corner, and a few family photos on the wall. But to me, it was a safe place. A place where I could shield my daughter from the Johnsons' cruelty and from the bitter cold. I carried her into the bedroom and gently laid her down. Even wrapped in my thick coat, she was still trembling. I dug through the closet for an old sweater, slipped it over her shoulders, then made a mug of hot cocoa, the sweet aroma filling the chilly air. "Drink this, sweetheart," I whispered, setting the mug in her hands. But she only stared at it, her eyes hollow, like she didn't even believe she deserved a bit of warmth. My phone rang, slicing through my thoughts. It was Daniel. His deep, steady voice came through the line. "Ms. Rose, I just filed the initial report at the station. But the Johnsons, they won't go down easy. They've got influence, you know that," Daniel said, his tone steady, his words carrying a quiet fire that never went out. "I'm ready to testify as a witness if you need me." Hearing that determination in his voice gave me hope. Daniel, my old student, the boy who once stood in the dojo with wide, eager eyes, was now beside me in a different kind of fight. "Help me prepare, Daniel," I said, my words short but filled with gratitude. "This could be a long battle." He answered simply, "I got it, coach. I'm here." The next morning, I took Jessica to see a therapist downtown in Denver. Dr. Susan Miller, an older woman with kind, thoughtful eyes, welcomed us into a warm, cozy office. After talking with Jessica, she turned to me, her voice heavy with sadness. "She's suffering from severe depression, Miss Rose. 4 miscarriages, combined with constant insults from her in-laws, have crushed her confidence. She needs rest, treatment, and above all, she needs to feel safe." I nodded, my chest tight. I'd known Jessica wasn't okay, but hearing it spoken aloud by the doctor was like another blade cutting into me. I looked over at my daughter, curled up small in the chair, her hands clenched together, and I blamed myself for not being there sooner. That afternoon, Daniel came by the apartment. He wasn't in his police uniform, just plain clothes, and he carried a bag of fruit and a stack of old cookbooks. He set them gently on the table in front of Jessica, hesitating for a moment. "I know you like cooking," he said softly. "Thought maybe starting small, like baking a pie or making some chicken noodle soup, might help you feel better." His voice was tender, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Jessica lowered her head, her fingers clutching the fabric of her blouse. "Thanks," she murmured, "but I don't think I can do anything anymore." Her words pierced me like needles. Daniel's face fell, but he didn't press her. He just gave a quiet nod, leaving the bag on the table. Before heading out, he turned to me. "Ms. Rose, whatever you need, just say it. I've got your back." That night, once Jessica had fallen asleep, I sat at the kitchen table under the dim light, surrounded by piles of papers. A sudden noise from outside made me jump. Then, a thick envelope slid silently under the door like a warning. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, the letters messy and rushed. "Don't mess with the Johnson family if you don't want to end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up." My blood boiled. I crumpled the paper and hurled it into the trash, the sound of it hitting the bin sharp and final. That note didn't scare me. It only fueled me. They thought I'd back down. They were wrong. That same night, I began gathering proof, bank receipts, messages, notes I had sent Jessica along with money to help her. Every slip of paper was evidence. Evidence that I had always tried to support her, even though Michael and his family had squandered most of it. Each paper was also a memory. The times Jessica called me, her voice trembling, saying she wanted to buy something for the house, only for Michael to dismiss her, to say it wasn't needed. I gripped my pen so tight it nearly snapped in my hand. I had trusted Michael. I thought he would care for my daughter. But he saw her as a tool, and when she stopped being useful, he cast her aside without mercy. In the middle of the night, Jessica woke up. She stumbled weakly into the kitchen, her legs trembling. She found me there at the table, buried in papers, my eyes heavy but restless. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I'm scared. I'm scared they'll hurt you." I looked up into her red, weary eyes, and my heart twisted painfully. I rose from my chair, walked to her, and pulled her into my arms, holding her fragile body close. "You don't have to be afraid," I said firmly, even though inside I was knotted with nerves. "From now on, I'm the one who will protect you. I promise." I led her back to bed, sitting at her side until her breathing slowed and she finally drifted off to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I went back to the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, making a list of what still needed to be done. I called an old lawyer friend who had once helped me with a case tied to the Taekwondo team. He promised to look into things, but warned me in a serious tone. "The Johnsons have a lot of influence in Denver, Miss Rose. They've got people in the courts. Get ready for a long fight." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I know," I said, "but I'm not stopping." The weeks leading up to the case felt like an endless nightmare. Every night, under the dim glow of the lamp in my tiny apartment, I read and reread every page. Bank receipts, medical reports about Jessica. Those cold, lifeless numbers were proof of my love, but also constant reminders of everything she had endured. Finally, the first day of the trial came. It felt like stepping onto a Taekwondo mat, except this time the stakes were my daughter's life. Jessica and I walked into the Denver courthouse. The morning chill seeped through my coat as I held her hand, her icy fingers trembling against mine. Her eyes were red, dark circles shadowing sleepless nights. She kept her head bowed, like she wanted to vanish from everyone's stare. I stood tall, trying to be the rock she needed, even though inside I was trembling too. "I'm here," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. She nodded weakly, but her empty eyes told me she had already given up. The Johnson family had arrived early. Michael, dressed in a sharp gray suit, carried himself with smug confidence, like a lawyer who thought he'd already won. Beside him was Robert, walking slowly but radiating authority, his gaze sharp as a blade. He smiled faintly, like the outcome was already written. In the family row, Linda and Megan sat stiff and elegant, whispering to each other, occasionally throwing us disdainful glances. Their hostility filled the air, but I forced myself to remain calm. This wasn't my fight. It was Jessica's. Daniel was there too, sitting in uniform in the spectator section. He gave me a slight nod, his steady gaze like a vow that he would not abandon us. Seeing him there made me feel less alone, like I finally had an ally in this battle. I nodded back, silently thanking him for standing with us, from that terrible Christmas Eve until now. The trial began. My lawyer, Mr. David Harris, stood tall and laid out each piece of evidence. He presented the bank transfers I had sent Jessica over the years, proof that I had always supported her, money that had ended up in Michael's hands. He also presented Jessica's medical records, with detailed notes from her therapist describing the crushing depression she faced. After 4 miscarriages and endless insults from her husband's family, Harris said, his voice thick with controlled emotion, Jessica wasn't just suffering physically. She was emotionally destroyed. They treated her like an outsider in her own home. I looked at my daughter. Her head was bowed, her hands clenched together tightly, as if she were trying to hold all the pain inside. I wanted to stand, to wrap my arms around her, but I knew I had to let the lawyer fight this battle for her. Then the Johnsons' young attorneys stood. One of them, polished in a sleek black suit, spoke with a commanding, arrogant voice. "Jessica's just faking her illness to be coddled. The Johnson family gave her everything, shelter, food, every need met. But she failed to fulfill her role. She failed as a wife." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. Faking. Coddled. My blood boiled. My fists clenched so tightly I could feel the heat rushing through my veins. They called a witness, Mrs. Karen Thompson, the Johnsons' former housekeeper. She stepped up to the stand, her eyes darting nervously, her voice shaky. "Mrs. Jessica was lazy," she claimed. "She'd lock herself in her room all day, neglecting the house. I had to do everything. Cooking, cleaning. I couldn't believe my ears." Jessica, the same woman who had poured her heart into every meal, who baked homemade pies just to please that family, was now being branded as lazy. I shot to my feet before I could stop myself. "You're lying. Jessica was never like that." The judge, a stern-faced man in middle age, slammed his gavel down. "Silence," he barked coldly. "This is a courtroom." My heart raced as I sank back into my seat, struggling to breathe. I glanced over at Robert Johnson. He smiled faintly, giving the judge a smug nod, like there was some invisible thread between them. The chill that crept over me told me what I already knew: this had been planned. I was just a pawn in their game. Jessica stayed hunched over, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the chair. I saw Daniel in the back row, his jaw tight, fists clenched, like he was barely keeping himself from exploding. Our lawyer, David Harris, pressed on, his voice steady. "Your Honor, we'd like to present key evidence, a recording from Christmas Eve, capturing the Johnson family's insults and psychological abuse toward Jessica." He played the audio Daniel had secretly recorded. Michael's voice rang out, cold and cruel: "She's just faking depression to dodge her duties." Then Linda's voice, dripping with contempt: "A woman who can't have kids, even if she eats well, is useless." And then Megan's sarcastic laugh: "She can't even manage to give birth." The courtroom fell into silence. Only faint whispers broke through the heavy air. I looked at Jessica. She shrank into herself, as if those words had stabbed her all over again. But the Johnsons' attorney jumped to his feet, objecting. "That recording is illegal, made without consent. It violates privacy rights." The judge nodded, his tone dry and final. "The recording is inadmissible." I felt the floor drop out from under me. My hands clutched the chair just to keep from collapsing. That recording, the clearest proof of the Johnsons' cruelty, tossed aside on a technicality. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered, confused. I looked at Daniel. His head hung low, fists trembling on his knees. Jessica hid her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back sobs. Every part of me wanted to lose it, to storm the judge's bench, to demand justice. But deep down, I knew justice wasn't living in that room. Robert Johnson sat calm, arrogant, like he'd known this would happen all along. I squeezed Jessica's cold hand, trying to lend her the strength I barely had left. After a grueling week of trial days, the final verdict came. I sat in the Denver courthouse, Jessica's trembling fingers clasped in mine. All week I had tried to stay strong, but every night back in my small apartment, my heart ached with helplessness. Beside me, Jessica's eyes were swollen red from sleepless nights. Her face was pale, as if life itself had been drained from her. I gripped her hand tighter, even though I was trembling, too. Michael walked into the courtroom like it was just another day, adjusting his tie with smug ease. Linda smoothed out her dress and sat tall, her lips painted deep red, a confident smile stretched across her face as if she already knew the outcome. Megan, in a flashy outfit, shot us a scornful glance. And behind Michael, Robert stood tall and imposing, his gaze sharp, reminding us that the Johnson family always kept control. Daniel was there too, sitting in his police uniform among the spectators. Daniel's eyes were steady, though I could still see the worry burning behind them. He gave me a small nod, a silent promise he'd be there no matter what. I met his gaze with gratitude, comforted by his presence. But when the judge entered, a middle-aged man with a flat, expressionless face, a chill ran through me. The air in the courtroom grew heavy, as if everyone braced for an inevitable blow. His voice came dry and firm. "The court grants the divorce request of the plaintiff, Jessica Harper Larson, and the defendant, Michael Johnson." For a second, a spark of hope lit inside me. Jessica broke into silent tears, streaks rolling down her pale cheeks. I squeezed her trembling hand, urging her to stay calm and listen. This divorce, it was what I wanted for her. A chance to finally escape the Johnsons' cage. But I knew it wasn't over. The judge's monotone carried on, like he was reading off a grocery list. "However, the court does not recognize the claims of domestic abuse due to insufficient evidence. As for assets, since Michael Johnson contributed more to the marriage's upkeep, the court awards him the majority of the shared property." The words slammed into me like a hammer. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. No recognition of abuse. Insufficient evidence. My mind flashed back to that Christmas Eve recording. Michael, Linda, Megan spitting cruelty, thrown out on a technicality. To Jessica's medical records. To the bank receipts. Twisted by their lawyers into weapons against us. And then it hit me. Robert. With his history as a judge, his deep ties in the system, he'd rigged it. I looked across the room at him. He tilted his head ever so slightly, that smug smile resting on his lips. It was fixed. Every step had been planned. I shot to my feet, my voice breaking with rage and grief. This is unfair. This isn't justice. The words echoed, silencing the room. Jessica grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with panic, but I didn't stop. You saw what they did to my daughter. You heard what she endured. And you dare say there was no abuse? You dare take everything from her? A guard stepped toward me, his voice firm. Ma'am, sit down, or I'll have to remove you. I glared at him, then at the judge. His face was a blank wall, like my pain meant nothing. I sank back into my chair, hands trembling, the world crumbling beneath me. Michael turned and locked eyes with me. He flashed a mocking smile, tugging his tie like he'd just won a trophy. Linda and Megan leaned toward each other, whispering, giggling under their breath, making sure I could hear. Their laughter was a knife twisting deep into my chest. Robert gave a slow nod, calm and arrogant, as if this was just another case he'd manipulated. I looked at them all, one by one, my blood boiling. They hadn't just stolen Jessica's justice. They had stolen my faith in the very system I once believed in. Beside me, Jessica buried her face in her hands, her body shaking, muffled sobs tearing through me like glass shards. I wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. The judge's ruling rang in my ears like a sentence, not just against Jessica, but against me too. Then Daniel suddenly rose from the back row, his glare fixed on the Johnsons. Veins bulged in his arms, fists clenched, his body trembling like a storm ready to break. I signaled him to stay calm, though inside I wanted to scream, to flip the tables, to break the entire courtroom apart. The judge slammed his gavel, his voice sharp. Order. The session is over. Everyone may leave. That gavel strike, it was the end. But for me, it felt like the start of a new kind of pain. People rose, murmurs filled the room, papers shuffled. I stayed seated, holding Jessica close, her trembling shoulders shaking in my arms, her sobs cutting me to pieces. Michael strutted toward us, smug, victorious. He leaned down, whispering in my ear, "See, Rose? I told you not to fight me. You're just a useless old woman." He flashed a crooked smile, his eyes gleaming, then turned his back on us like we weren't even worth the space we occupied. His words were gasoline on the fire already raging inside me. My blood surged, my veins burned. My body tensed like a bowstring drawn to its breaking point. Years of taekwondo discipline told me to restrain myself, but in that moment, all the barriers shattered. I took a step forward, my heart pounding, ready to deliver a blow I'd regret forever. But Daniel stepped in front of me, his eyes blazing, his lips tight, fists clenched like he was about to strike Michael himself. In him, I saw my own fury, uncontainable, raw. The courtroom buzzed with tension. "Are they going to fight?" someone whispered. Phones shot up, camera flashes cut through the air. A journalist leaned in with his lens, hungry for a scandal. Michael turned, startled, but quickly put on his smirk again. "Go ahead, hit me. I'll make sure you lose everything. Who do you think you are? Just a low-life cop." He stepped closer, taunting, certain Daniel wouldn't dare. Daniel's fist shook, his breath heavy, his eyes red with fire. I knew he could do something that couldn't be undone. Suddenly Jessica tore free from my grasp. She ran to Daniel and clung to his arm, sobbing, her broken voice tearing through the chaos. "No. Please, don't do it. I don't want you or Mom to be violent like him. I just want peace. I just want to live." Her cry cut through the courtroom like lightning. Jessica clung to Daniel's arm with all her strength, her tears streaming down her face, her small hands gripping him like he was her last anchor. Daniel froze, breathing hard, his fist trembling, then slowly loosening. His hand dropped to his side. He bowed his head, lips tight, swallowing the rage that had consumed him. Camera clicks filled the air, flashes illuminating Jessica clinging to Daniel, Michael smirking in defiance. Some in the room wept. A woman dabbed her eyes. A man shook his head in sorrow. Jessica's pain had pierced them. But the Johnsons sat unmoved. Linda and Megan leaned together, whispering, their cold smiles never fading. Robert nodded slightly, his authority intact, like he still controlled every thread of this twisted game. The judge slammed his gavel again, his voice cutting cold. Order. If this continues, guards will clear the room. The sound snapped everyone back to reality. I stepped forward, gathered Jessica into my arms, and held her tightly. She sobbed into my shoulder, trembling like a lost child. Daniel stood beside us, head bowed, his lips pressed tight, like he blamed himself for not doing more. I placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, nodding gently, letting him know I understood, and that I was grateful he was there. Michael adjusted his tie, turned, and walked away, his steps heavy with triumph. Linda and Megan followed close behind, their cold laughter stabbing me like knives. The courtroom emptied slowly, until only 3 of us remained. Me, Jessica, and Daniel. 3 people, all carrying the same bitter lump in our throats. I hugged Jessica tighter, feeling her weak breath against my shoulder. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to fight anymore. I'm tired. Can we just go home?" Those words tore my heart in two. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that I'd keep fighting, but my throat closed tight, and no words came. I led Jessica out of the courthouse, Daniel walking silently beside us, his gaze steady. The faint Denver sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but it couldn't warm the heaviness inside me. I knew this ruling wasn't just a loss. It was a declaration of war. The Johnsons might have won in court, but I would not let them win in Jessica's life. I looked at her, her red eyes holding the faintest spark, just a flicker of hope. For that spark, I swore I would never give up. In the days after the trial, Denver hummed with an undercurrent. Local news headlines screamed, "Johnson trial, justice bought." Reading those words, my heart pounded. They captured exactly what Jessica and I had felt. On social media, the video of Jessica clinging to Daniel in the courtroom spread like wildfire. The image of my daughter, eyes swollen with tears, begging him not to become violent, touched people deeply. Comments poured in. The Johnsons think they can control everything. Jessica deserves better than this. Sitting in our small apartment, scrolling through those messages, I felt a flicker of comfort. The courts had abandoned us, but the people hadn't. The Johnsons, despite their legal win, began to pay a different price. I heard whispers about Robert, his old colleagues muttering that he'd used his influence to twist the verdict. Michael, branded the lawyer of injustice, became a target of online outrage. The family's polished prestige began crumbling like a sandcastle washed away by waves. I didn't celebrate, but I felt a sliver of justice. Not from the courts, but from the voices of the people. Jessica moved in with me, into my tiny apartment lit by the warm glow of old lamps and filled with family photos on the walls. Each morning I woke early to cook her breakfast, sometimes pancakes with maple syrup, other times just scrambled eggs and toast. She would sit quietly at the table, cradling a mug of hot tea, staring out the window as pale sunlight spilled across Denver's rooftops. Some days, silent tears slipped down her cheeks like raindrops. But I could see, slowly, she was healing. Each day, she spoke a little more. Her eyes were still fragile, but not as empty as before. I didn't push her. I simply stayed by her side, a mother ready to shield her daughter from any storm. Daniel became a steady presence in our lives. He'd stop by with poinsettias, or donuts from the corner bakery. And each time, I saw Jessica brighten, just a little, like his presence was medicine for her wounded soul. One afternoon, he came by nervously carrying a small box. Inside was a keychain shaped like a taekwondo uniform, the very symbol I had once taught him and all my students. "You don't have to be strong right away," he said gently. "But you can start over, little by little, just like Ms. Rose did." Jessica froze, her eyes filling with emotion. She pressed her lips together, nodded slowly, and whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was soft but full of feeling. I turned away, wiping tears before she could see. 4 years, she'd been belittled, told she was worthless. And now, someone saw her worth. Not for what she could do, but for who she was. One golden evening, as the sunset bathed the apartment in light, Jessica sat across from Daniel on the couch. Her hands twisted the edge of her sweater, her voice trembling. "Daniel," she said softly, "I might never be able to have kids. If that disappoints you." She stopped, fear filling the silence. I was in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, my heart pounding as I waited for his answer. He smiled, warm and steady, took her hands, and looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't need that, Jessica. You're already my family." His words were like sunlight breaking through a storm. My eyes blurred, my throat tight. After years of humiliation, after being told again and again she was nothing without children, someone finally told her she was enough. I turned away, letting tears fall silently, my heart overflowing with gratitude. That spring, on Easter, I took Jessica by the hand and led her through Denver's main square, just like when she was a little girl, skipping happily along lit streets. The square buzzed with children's laughter, the smell of fresh pies floating from the stalls. Jessica wore a light sweater, her hair tied back, and for the first time in months, I saw her smile. A radiant, springtime smile. "Mom," she said softly, "I miss these days. I miss when you taught me to bake apple pie. When you told me about your taekwondo matches." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "I miss them too, sweetheart. And I'll always be here to make more memories with you." We sat on a wooden bench, watching kids play by the fountain. And in that simple moment, a truth struck me deep. Courtroom justice can be twisted, bought with money and power. But the justice of the heart, love, respect, resilience, no one can touch that. Jessica, though scarred, was slowly finding herself again, step by step. And me, at 65, after all the battles I'd fought, I finally understood. My greatest strength wasn't in punches thrown in the ring. It was in my love for my daughter. Daniel showed up with a bag of warm churros. He handed one to Jessica, and they laughed together like old friends. I watched them, my heart full of hope. Jessica might never forget the scars the Johnsons left, but she was learning to move forward. To love herself. To open her heart to those who truly valued her. And me, an old fighter, knew that the greatest fight I'd ever won was for my daughter's happiness.